An officer with the NYPD shot down in cold blood while on duty in the Bronx early this morning, and the department has just released the 911 call from her partner.
That frantic call coming over the radio shortly after midnight from Officer Miosotis Familia's partner. Police say Familia was writing in her notebook in the front seat of the unit when the killer walked up and fired one round through the passenger side window, striking her in the head. She died in the hospital a few hours later. Police say the shooter was this man, Alexander Bonds, seen here in a previous mugshot. Responding officers catching up with him less than a block away, killing him after a brief shootout.
She was on duty, serving this city, protecting people, doing what she believed in and doing the job she loved.
Authorities now looking for a motive. The 34-year-old Bonds had a violent past, sentenced to 6 years in Attica prison for armed robbery. He was paroled in 2013, and there were many other arrests, including one in 2001, Bonds accused of attacking an officer with brass knuckles. Officials also focusing on an 11-minute anti-police rant Bonds posted on Facebook last September. The ex-con complaining about his treatment in prison and about cops getting away with killing people. Familia, a 48-year-old mother of three, was a 12-year veteran of the force, remembered by those who had kind encounters with her.
I heard it this morning, and it really touched me because I knew her. I knew her.
For more on the NYPD response to Officer Familia's murder and what can be done to try to prevent future attacks, we turn to Michael Murphy. He's a former Lieutenant Commander Detective of the New York Police Department. Mike, first of all, what kind of response are we likely to see from last night's shooting from both the NYPD and from officers who are working the beat?
Well, first you're going to have a funeral for a brave police officer that was murdered last night. You're going to have extra vigilant officers on the street going forward. Not that they're not always vigilant, but usually situations like this awaken people more. Bring them more back down to where they need to be as far as tactics and safety is concerned.
The police are saying that the gunman who killed Officer Familia is apparently a convict who taped and posted an anti-police screed online last year. Does the NYPD do anything like the NSA does, where they check for threats online or to see if there's anybody posting anti-police stuff?
Yes, the NYPD is constantly scanning social media. They use different apps and different vendors to do that for them. They use certain phrases and catchwords, and if they get a hit on that, they will investigate that source. It could be an open source where they can look at it freely. If not, if it's something that's deemed really credible, a threat to officer safety, they will then secure a subpoena and a warrant to open up that social media site to find out who that person is and what that information actually is saying.
But there's no way to monitor somebody who might post something anti-NYPD ad infinitum and just keep watching somebody, right?
I mean, they constantly scan the system, but just focusing on one person, no, unless there's a specific threat from that person.
The fatal shooting last night leading a lot of people to wonder about the safety or whether NYPD officers are being targeted. There have been 4 in the line of duty deaths of NYPD officers in 2017. 1 was from a 20-year-old shooting and 2 were from 9/11. This is the first from an incident this year. There was only 1 such death in 2016, a couple in 2015, and a couple in 2014. That was officers Liu and Ramos. It's easy to say that there's a trend or that officers are less safe or their safety is not being better protected, but do the numbers bear that out, and how widespread is that sense among officers?
Well, right, the numbers would say that, is there a trend? No, but policing and concern for officer safety has become a national concern for police officers across the country. It's no longer local to New York, Boston, the East Coast, West Coast. And as you know, as we've discussed on past shows together, the atmosphere of anti-police in this country has grown. Officers feel that they are under threat at all times. They feel that the media is biased against them. They feel the media portrays other groups in favor of them. And although the numbers, like you said, this year, this is the first officer killed, shot in the line of duty, the threat is always there, and the officer is always concerned about whether or not how they are perceived in the public and how the media perceives them as portrays them as well.
But you may have hit on something there, that officers feel like they are under greater threat, but we really haven't seen that threat at the level it was since 2014 when officers Liu and Ramos were shot. Is there a disconnect between the reality of the threat against police and what people's perception is?
Well, if you're going to just specifically go back to the Liu and Ramos shooting, like I said earlier, when we were speaking earlier, that this is more of a national concern for officers. And you look at what happened in Dallas and Baton Rouge with those officers that were assassinated and ambushed, and other ones throughout the country that happened just last year, since last year. I think we have to look at it that way now as an issue for law enforcement nationally and not just locally anymore.
And Mike, from your reading of what happened last night, is there anything that comes to mind as to what could have been done to try to prevent a shooting like the one we saw last night, or what we can do better to protect police in general?
We as officers are always battling complacency. I'm not going to criticize what happened with these officers, what they did last night. They were working July 4th detail in a temporary vehicle, THV it's called, and it was just an assassination. I mean, short of having every police vehicle followed or extra security, these are things that these are threats, and these are things that are going to continue happening to police officers. You can do your best at securing police stations and extra officers on the street, but eventually, if someone has it out for an officer and wants to kill one, it's just going to happen. And what we have to do, and what the police departments around the country need to do, is constantly train their officers, keep them vigilant, battle complacency. It's a lot easier said than done, but it's just going to be an ongoing issue for some time, and this is what needs to be done to keep officers safe.
Mike Murphy, former lieutenant detective in the NYPD. Mike, always appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Up next, are Senate Republicans making progress on their health care bill? We'll take a look at where they stand and whether they're getting closer to getting their plan actually passed.